No history, no sleep. In the early 1700s, aboard the dull merchant pirate vessel, the Gentle Breeze, tensions were unusually high, but not because of gold, or rum, or betrayal. No, it was the spoons. Specifically, where the spoons should be kept. Captain Elwood Finch, a man known for his deep love of order and lukewarm tea, insisted that all spoons be stored in the third drawer below the maps. His reasoning was simple: it was within reach, and the drawer squeaked less than the others. First mate Gregory Lefty Porridge, however, disagreed. He preferred the spoons be hung on small nails near the kitchen door. Faster access, he said, for soup emergencies, though there had never been one. This disagreement slowly divided the crew. The pro-drawer faction argued it was tradition, while the nail hangers believed in progress. For weeks, meals were delayed, charts were ignored, and one sailor drew angry doodles of spoons in the ship's log. Eventually, they held a formal meeting. 8 votes for drawers, 7 for nails. 1 abstention from the cook, who quietly switched to using forks out of pure exhaustion. Nothing really changed. The spoons ended up scattered all over the galley anyway. Some in boots, some in barrels. One was found months later inside a hollowed-out lemon. Captain Finch retired shortly after, citing cutlery fatigue. And so, the matter of spoon placement faded into the mist, never truly resolved, but always quietly remembered. Some say, the debate lives on, whispered in kitchens at sea. In the year 1683, aboard a modest pirate vessel called the Mild Complaint, a set of rules was established not for mutiny, nor for treasure, but for laundry. The ship's quartermaster, Silas Drift, had grown tired of seeing damp socks fluttering from the mast. So, during a long and uneventful stretch of calm sea, he proposed an official pirate laundry code. The code declared that laundry was to be done only on Thursdays. Shirts were to be rinsed in barrels, then wrung out over the side of the ship, but never near the cannon deck, because one time, someone's underpants blocked the fuse. Each pirate was responsible for labeling their garments with small bits of knotted string. And O string, no claim. This led to some pirates pretending they'd never owned socks at all, to avoid washing them. Arguments soon broke out over clotheslines. Were they to be hung across the bow or the stern? Captain Horace Two-Towel Mudge decreed that lines could only run from east to west, even though no one was quite sure which way that was. For months, the code held strong. Thursday became the quietest day on board. Shirts flapped gently, and pirates sipped weak tea while squinting at their breeches drying in the wind. But eventually, the laundry code was forgotten. A rainstorm washed it overboard. Literally. No one bothered to rewrite it. Today, few remember this code, but somewhere, drifting deep in maritime law, is a clause about breeches, barrels, and why laundry was always slightly damp on Fridays. In 1710, a mild-mannered pirate named Elias Peebleton washed ashore on an island no bigger than a quiet fishing village. There were no people. No treasure, no landmarks. Just sand, some grass, and one rather average rock. But Elias believed every piece of land deserved a proper map. With a soggy notebook and a stub of charcoal, he began. The first day, he drew the shoreline, then the center, then the shadow of a tree that wasn't actually there, just an old root. He named the rock Rock 1. A week later, he found another, Rock 2. By month 3, he had numbered over 73 rocks. Many were just the same rock drawn from a slightly different angle. He started inventing landmarks. A small dip in the sand became the Valley of Mild Decline. A shell was labeled the Shell of Wonder, though it was, admittedly, quite ordinary. Each day, Elias would pace the same stretches of land, making tiny revisions. Once, he redrew the shoreline because a wave moved some driftwood. Twice, he adjusted the map's compass rose because the wind felt a little more east-ish. By year 2, he built a small post made of twigs and used it to measure sun angles. He called this his observation tower. By year 3, he wrote a 12-page appendix to document the different textures of sand underfoot from slightly crunchy to disappointingly smooth. And in the 4th year, with a full notebook and a second notebook devoted only to wind notes, he declared the map complete. The island remained nameless. There was no one to name it for. When finally rescued, he asked the crew if they'd like to hear about Pebble Region 5 or Breeze Path C. They politely declined. Today, that map is lost. Or perhaps it was never really needed. But somewhere in the annals of unimportant cartography, Elias Peebleton remains the most thorough pirate ever. Chart absolutely nothing. In the spring of 1721, aboard the pirate ship the Reasonably Dangerous, something mildly confusing occurred. It began, as many maritime mysteries do, in the crew supply drawer where a fresh shipment of eye patches had just arrived. There were 27 eye patches, all black, all identical, or so they seemed. Captain Norville one-eyed twice. Briggs insisted on labeling each eye patch with initials, but the quartermaster had already done so using invisible ink, which, as it turned out, vanished in sea air. The crew, all eager to claim their patch, grabbed whatever looked familiar, but Left Eye Larry accidentally wore Right Eye Rick's patch. Rick, in turn, took one belonging to Squinty Jim, who preferred velvet lining, and now had burlap against his socket. Soon, confusion reigned. Pirates bumped into barrels. Some walked in circles. A man named Quiet Paul, who actually had both eyes, wore 2 patches just to avoid conversation. By the 3rd day, the crew requested a formal eye patch inspection. Each man stood in line as Captain Briggs examined their fit and style. He tapped each patch twice with a spoon and muttered, "Hum." But the spoon revealed nothing. Eventually, the cook suggested drawing small smiley faces on the inside of each patch to tell them apart. This was abandoned when the ink ran into everyone's eyes. A compromise was reached. They would swap patches each week, at random. No one truly knew whose patch was whose, but oddly, things got better. The pirates began seeing the world, even with one eye, from each other's perspective. Except for Squinty Jim. He never forgave Rick for the burlap. And so, the great eye patch mix-up was never fully solved. It simply became a tradition. Even now, some say the spirit of 1721 lives on. Every time you can't find your left sock, deep below the deck of the pirate ship, the drifting possibility, tucked behind a crooked plank and a creaky barrel, was a small hidden room. It wasn't filled with gold. It wasn't even locked. In fact, most pirates didn't even remember it was there. And that was exactly the point. In the early 1700s, pirate architects, if you can call men with saws and too much time, architects often added secret compartments to ships. These were meant for smuggling, hiding, or storing treasure maps with X's that led to nothing in particular. But on the drifting possibility, the secret room was empty. It had a stool, a shelf, and one lantern that flickered slightly, even when not lit. It was rumored to smell faintly of cabbage, though no cabbage had ever been stored inside. Some pirates believed it was a thinking room. Others said it was cursed, or blessed, or both. Once, a sailor named Marin Duckfoot went inside to write poetry. He came out 4 hours later with nothing but a haiku about a wet boot. Over time, the room gained reputation, not for what it contained, but for what it didn't. No sounds, no wind, no tasks, just space. It became a place to stand quietly when life on the sea was too noisy. Some pirates snuck in just to blink slowly. Others leaned on the wall and stared at nothing. There was a ship's meeting once to decide if the room should be used for anything practical. The decision was unanimous: absolutely not. Because the value of a secret room isn't in how it's used, but in the quiet possibility of maybe someday needing it, or not. Today, that room and many like it are lost to the sea, but their blueprints probably still exist. Somewhere in a drawer, under something more important. In the year 1707, aboard the modest vessel, the Gentle Scoundrel, a silver spoon quietly disappeared from the captain's dining chest. It wasn't polished. It wasn't engraved. It was, by all accounts, a very average spoon. Slightly bent, a little dull, but it was the captain's favorite. Suspicion quickly fell upon Bartholomew, maybe Barney Griggs, who had last been seen eating stew with a spoon that looked suspiciously like the captain's. Barney denied everything. "I brought my own spoon," he insisted. When asked where it came from, he claimed to have found it in a boot. And so, the crew declared a trial. They gathered below deck, rearranging crates into benches and turning a barrel into a judge's podium. Captain Harrow presided. The parrot, Crumbles, was asked to remain silent. Evidence was presented. A spoon was shown. It did not match the other spoons on board, but it also didn't look especially unique. Barney was asked to demonstrate his spoon ownership history. He described, in painful detail, every meal he had ever eaten since age 9. A witness named Greasy Milton claimed to have seen Barney polishing the spoon, but Milton was known to lie about anything involving food. The ship's cook, Eliza Chop, testified that spoons often went missing. She once found 3 in a cannon barrel. The trial lasted 3 weeks. During this time, everyone ate with their hands to preserve the spoon-related evidence. Eventually, the jury, made up of 4 pirates and 1 sea turtle named Roger, who mostly blinked, declared the case unresolvable. Barney was neither punished nor forgiven. Instead, the ship added a new rule to its code. Spoons are not to be remembered after sundown. And so, the matter was never spoken of again, except at dinner, where everyone glanced at each other suspiciously, just in case. His name was Wendell Toothpick Jones, though nobody remembered why. He was hired onto the Whispering Doubloon as a map reader, deck scrubber, and occasional harmonica player. His arsum was modest. His sea legs were non-existent. Because, truthfully, Wendell was terrified of the ocean. No one knew this at first. He boarded the ship with confidence, or at least with a long coat that billowed convincingly. But he never looked directly at the water. He walked with care, always one step away from the edge, as if the waves were whispering secrets he didn't want to hear. At night, while other pirates told stories under the stars, Wendell stared at the planks beneath him. He said they were safer than the sky. The captain first noticed something odd when Wendell refused to lean over the rail during dolphin sightings. "They're just wet horses," Wendell muttered, not looking up. Eventually, the crew confronted him. "Wendell," they asked, "why do you flinch every time a seagull squawks?" He replied, "Because squawking sounds like sinking if you hear it wrong." No one had a response for that. They offered to help him overcome his fear. One pirate brought him a bucket of seawater and placed it gently at his feet. Wendell stared at it for 10 minutes, then covered it with a hat. Another tried singing ocean shanties in reverse, hoping to desensitize him. Wendell just hummed along quietly and added a tambourine. Over time, the crew adjusted. They built Wendell a small hut in the center of the deck, with no windows and a floor that didn't creak. He worked there daily, drawing maps with great precision and zero enthusiasm. When storms came, he sat still. When waves crashed, he blinked. He never screamed, just frowned slowly, like someone remembering a forgotten errand. And though he never quite made peace with the ocean, he learned to live above it. With a mug of warm tea, and his name carved quietly into a stool. Because sometimes, being a pirate isn't about bravery. Sometimes, it's just about showing up anyway. Somewhere off the coast of the Lesser Tumble Islands, hidden behind a tavern with bad soup and worse spelling, existed a pirate society so secret that most of its members forgot they were in it. They called themselves the Order of the Mildly Determined, and they only met on Tuesdays. No one knew why. Probably because Mondays were too early, and by Wednesday, things got busy. The rules were simple. You had to wear at least one sock. No shouting. Meetings ended when someone yawned 3 times. Their headquarters was a leaning shack built partially from driftwood and partially from furniture stolen from other shacks. Inside were 3 chairs, 1 table, and a framed painting of a whale wearing a monocle. The whale had no name, but everyone respected him. The society didn't plan raids. They didn't chart treasure routes. Mostly, they just sat quietly, sipping room temperature tea and discussing things like, what if parrots had jobs? Or, why don't cannons have curtains? Minutes were taken, but nobody read them. One pirate, named Terrence, once suggested making T-shirts. The idea was voted down due to lack of enthusiasm and thread. Another, called Mild Becky, brought up the idea of a motto. She suggested, "We meet, therefore we are." No one objected. So it stuck. Sometimes, meetings didn't happen because it rained. Other times, they forgot it was Tuesday. Still, the society endured. Why? Perhaps because, even among pirates, there is comfort in routine, in knowing that, once a week, you can sit beside others and say nothing important at all. No pressure. And no shouting. Just quiet nods and tepid beverages. And somewhere, probably under a stack of soggy notebooks, a faded list of members remains, smudged, folded, and slightly burned, with Tuesdays marked in bold. It was a Tuesday, or maybe a Thursday. The day didn't matter much except that it was foggy inside the ship. Not outside, just inside. The Wandering Figment was an unusually large pirate ship, originally designed to carry both treasure and a small traveling library. Over the years, the crew kept adding rooms, a second galley, a hallway that led to nowhere, a broom closet that locked from the outside, and a music room no one played music in. By the time Captain Vernish realized, the ship had more doors than crew members, and at least 3 staircases that spiraled without destination. One morning, Quartermaster Aloys went to fetch biscuits and never returned. She was found 3 hours later in a hallway lined with paintings of chairs. None of them were hers. Soon after, the navigator got lost on his way to the helm. When asked where he'd been, he simply replied, "There's a room with 16 mirrors. I counted." Things escalated when the cook fell asleep in the soup pantry and woke up in the room full of mismatched boots. A full search was ordered, but no one knew where to start. Crewmates tied ropes around their waists so they wouldn't lose each other, but most ropes were too short, and one was accidentally tied to a coat rack, which later escaped. Someone suggested drawing a map of the ship. The map turned into a spiral, then a circle, then a doodle of a confused man looking at a doorway. After several hours, the captain declared, "We are not lost. We are simply internally misaligned." It became tradition to knock 3 times before entering any door, just in case it led to another corridor or someone's misplaced nap room. Eventually, they marked the safe paths with chalk. Then the rain came, inside. Again, not outside, just inside. And so, the crew adapted. They gave up on fixed directions. Meals were whenever you found the kitchen. Sleep was wherever you stopped walking. And the parrot gave up flying altogether and took the elevator. If you visit the Wandering Figment today, you might find them still wandering, or perhaps just paused, waiting for a better hallway. Captain Elmer Greybeard wasn't interested in treasure, rum, or revenge. He was interested in sand. Not beaches, not the ocean. Just sand. Every port, every island, every lonely stretch of forgotten coastline. Elmer brought a little glass vial. He'd scoop up exactly 1 spoonful of sand, cork it tightly, and label it in his shaky handwriting. North Gull Cove, mostly beige, or South Shoal number 3, very gritty, or probably near Tortuga, unsure. His cabin was filled with shelves. The walls creaked under the weight of his collection. Over 400 jars, each slightly different, though to anyone else, they all looked the same. He didn't care. The crew thought it odd at first, then boring, then oddly comforting. While other pirates swapped swords or tales of mutiny, Elmer would sit quietly, polishing the glass of mid-dune dust, faintly yellow. He said it helped him think. About what? No one knew. He rarely spoke, except about sand. He could talk for hours about grain texture, shell fragments, and the way certain sand squeaked under boots. He once gave a full speech about sand. That was probably tired. No one interrupted. The crew learned to respect the jars. When one fell during a storm, the ship went silent. Elmer stood over the shattered glass and spilled grains with the reverence of a man who'd lost an old friend. He didn't cry, but he did whisper something to the sand before sweeping it into a small wooden box labeled, "Accident, November." Years passed. Eventually, when storms came or maps failed, the crew stopped checking compasses. They just asked Elmer where the softest sands were. He always knew. And when he vanished, as pirates tend to do, all he left behind was one last jar on his desk. No label, just sand. Maybe from a secret island. Or maybe, finally, from home. Somewhere between the crashing waves and the whisper of forgotten maps lie stories that were never meant to be exciting. Not every pirate swung from rigging with a blade in their teeth. Some simply misplaced their boots, or argued about chairs, or got slightly confused by their own ship. These are the stories you don't hear in taverns. There are no ballads written for Captain Elmer's sand jars, or the Secret Tuesday Society, or the time a crew got turned around trying to find their own kitchen. But that's exactly why they matter. Because in between the cannon fire and buried gold, there was boredom. And in that boredom, there was something quietly real, something slow, something sleepy. So next time you hear the word pirate, don't just imagine battles or storms. Imagine 2 sailors discussing whether parrots get seasick. Imagine a lost boot, a hallway that leads nowhere, a jar of beige sand that means more than gold ever could. And maybe, just maybe, you'll remember these lost legends of the sea. Soft, uneventful, perfect for drifting away. Good night.